It's supposed to be the land of the free. I don't see how. Count me in. Oh, America. Oh, America. America.
The room was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. James Armistead Lafayette, disguised as a loyalist servant, stood on the edge of his nerves as he waited for the arrival of the infamous Benedict Arnold. He had spent months ingratiating himself into Arnold's inner circle, posing as a loyal servant while secretly feeding information to General Lafayette and the Continental Army. As the door creaked open, James straightened his back, his heart pounding in his chest. Benedict Arnold, a man known for his cunning and treachery, sauntered into the room with an air of arrogance. James fought to maintain his composure, his eyes darting around, scanning for any sign of danger.
Armistead.
Arnold sneered, his voice dripping with disdain.
Fetch me a drink, and make it quick.
James nodded obediently, his hands trembling slightly as he poured a glass of wine. He approached Arnold, his eyes fixed on the general's face, searching for any hint of suspicion. He handed the glass to Arnold, his heart pounding in his ears. Arnold took a sip, his eyes narrowing as he studied James.
You're an observant one, Armistead,
he said, his voice laced with curiosity.
You always seem to know what's happening around me.
James forced a smile, his mind racing. He had to think quickly, to divert any suspicion away from himself.
Just doing my duty, General,
he replied, his voice steady.
I aim to anticipate your every need.
Arnold chuckled, a sinister gleam in his eyes.
You're a smart one, Armistead. Perhaps too smart for your own good.
James felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to show any sign of fear. He had to stay focused, to protect the information he held, information that could tip the scales of the war. As the evening wore on, James continued to serve Arnold, his mind calculating every word, every gesture. He listened attentively, gathering scraps of information that he would later relay to Lafayette. But with each passing moment, the risk grew greater, the danger more palpable. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the door, growing louder with each passing second. James's heart skipped a beat, fear gripping him tightly. Could it be a trap? Had his cover been blown? The door burst open, and General Lafayette stormed into the room, his eyes ablaze with determination.
Arnold,
he shouted, his voice commanding.
You're under arrest for treason.
Arnold's face contorted in rage and disbelief. He lunged for his pistol, but before he could reach it, James sprang into action. He tackled Arnold to the ground, his training as a soldier kicking in. They grappled, James desperately trying to keep Arnold subdued. Minutes passed like hours as Lafayette's men flooded the room, securing Arnold and restoring order. James took a moment to catch his breath, his heart pounding with adrenaline. He had done it. He had helped capture one of the most notorious turncoats in American history. As the room cleared and silence settled, James looked at Lafayette, a mixture of relief and pride in his eyes. Lafayette approached him, his expression filled with gratitude.
Armistead,
Lafayette said, his voice filled with admiration.
You have served your country with much bravery and loyalty. Your sacrifice will be remembered.
James nodded, his chest swelling with pride. He had risked everything, played a dangerous game of deception, all for the cause of freedom. As he stood there, surrounded by the echoes of history, he knew that he had not only played a vital role in securing America's independence, but, more importantly, he stood as a living testament to his people's rightful claim to the future greatness and rewards of this country, just as deserving as anyone else. And in that moment, James Armistead Lafayette's name would forever be etched in the annals of American history, a symbol of courage and sacrifice for generations to come. What's good, fam? Welcome back to another episode of Trap History, where we dive deep into untold stories that reshape our understanding of history. I'm your host, the Project Professor, aka Hood Historian. Today, we're asking a thought-provoking question: should black people celebrate Independence Day? Let's find out. We all know the story of the American Revolution, right? The tale of brave patriots fighting for freedom against British tyranny. But what if I told you there were unsung heroes in the fight for independence? Black revolutionaries who put it all on the line for a nation that didn't always recognize their worth. After watching a review of the Continental Army in New York, one French officer estimated that as much as a quarter of the army was black. They served in almost every unit, in every battle from Concord to Fort Ticonderoga to Trenton to Yorktown. But why don't we hear more about their exploits? Well, during the 1800s there was a conscious effort by the powers that be to suppress their involvement, trying to erase their contributions from the history books. Around 10,000 black men applied for pension as Revolutionary War veterans from the end of the war up until the mid-1800s. Meet the legends, y'all. George Middleton, James Armistead Lafayette, Agrippa Hull, Prince Hall, and so many more. These extraordinary individuals were at the forefront of the fight for freedom, even though their stories have been buried by the sands of time. It's time to bring them back into the spotlight. Most people know that the first person to die for this country was a young black man named Crispus Attucks, but lesser known are black heroes in the first actual battle of the Revolution. As war with Britain broke out in the spring of 1775, Massachusetts patriots needed every man they could get, and a number of black men, both slave and free, served bravely at Lexington and Concord, and then at the Battle of Bunker Hill. In fact, according to archived documents, a former slave named Salem performed so heroically at Bunker Hill exactly what he did has been lost to history that 14 officers wrote to the Massachusetts legislature, commending him as a brave and gallant soldier who deserved a reward. You see, our history books often overlook the significant contributions of black soldiers, spies, and activists during the Revolution. But did you know that many of these heroes emerged during the harsh winter at Valley Forge? Yeah, that's right. While the Continental Army suffered from lack of supplies and manpower, it was black men who stepped up to the plate. Revolutionary War surgeon and former governor of Massachusetts William Eustis stated,
"Free colored soldiers entered the ranks with the whites, but the slaves were induced to enter the service in consequence of a law of Congress, by which, on condition of their serving in the ranks during the war, they were made freemen. This hope of liberty inspired them with fresh courage to oppose their breasts to the Hessian bayonet at Red Bank, and enabled them to endure with fortitude the cold and famine of Valley Forge."
As the war began, General George Washington, initially hesitant to recruit black men, realized their value in the face of adversity. Some of the bravest warriors were black men who fought alongside their white counterparts, sharing the hardships equally. They fought for freedom, even though they were often denied their own. Take the example of the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, better known as the Black Regiment. Desperate for manpower, Washington reluctantly agreed to the enlistment of black men. More than 140 courageous black soldiers joined the ranks, fighting gallantly until the decisive Battle of Yorktown, where the dream of American independence became a reality. These men weren't just support roles, folks. They were on the front lines, 10 toes down, standing on business. They fought alongside their white counterparts, proving their valor and dedication to the fight for freedom. In fact, they fought so bravely and inflicted so many casualties on Hessian mercenaries during the Battle of Newport, Rhode Island, in the summer of 1778, that one Hessian officer resigned his commission rather than lead his men against the 1st Rhode Island after the unit had repelled 3 fierce Hessian assaults. He didn't want his men to think he was leading them to slaughter. Yeah, that part. And let's not forget the spies. The most famous being the aforementioned James Armistead Lafayette, an enslaved African-American turned double agent. He played a pivotal role in gathering intelligence that contributed to the victory at Yorktown. James infiltrated British General Charles Cornwallis' camp at Yorktown by pretending to be a runaway slave seeking his freedom with the British Army. He earned Cornwallis' trust and found himself able to look at the general's papers, took note of troop size and the health and morale of the soldiers, and communicated all he learned back to Washington. While he was giving Washington intel on Cornwallis, James was actually acting as a double agent, leading Cornwallis to believe he would spy for the British Army, all the while giving Cornwallis false intelligence about the Patriots. His bravery and cunning helped tip the scales in favor of the American forces. But he wasn't the only one. There was a network of black spies working for both sides, most of whom were unnamed enslaved African Americans who had opportunities to see and hear, but who were not deemed a threat by their very status as an enslaved person. One of the first recorded instances of a black spy was a slave named Quaco Honeyman. He was responsible for the capture of a British General Richard Prescott.
Quaco, the Negro who had been employed in the kitchen of Mr. Overing, had carried a very perfect account of the situation of the general in the house. Soon after, in 1777, the general was captured by Patriot forces.
The intelligence given by Quaco enabled the raid to be successful. His efforts didn't go unnoticed as he was granted freedom from his loyalist owner after petitioning to the state legislature. Even the success of the white spies that received most of the recognition and fame in Washington's spy ring was only possible because of the work of the unheralded black spies working with them. For example, in New England, a black enslaved man known only as Cato was one of the many Negroes responsible for getting messages through the unsuspecting eyes of the enemy lines under the guise of delivering packages and clothing. A former governor of South Carolina, John Rutledge, was documented as having to testify on behalf of an enslaved African-American spy named Antigua after the war, stating,
Antigua always executed the commissions with which he was entrusted with diligence and fidelity, and obtained very considerable and important information from within the enemy's lines, frequently at the risk of his life.
Antigua was given his freedom, but the legislature went even further and granted freedom to his wife, Hagar, and their child. As you can see, American independence is just as black and it is white, if not more. We can't let history erase their sacrifices, their invaluable contributions. These black revolutionaries fought for liberty, both for themselves and for their country. They deserve their place in the annals of history, and it's our duty to ensure their stories are told and celebrated. So, should black people celebrate Independence Day? Absolutely. We celebrate the strength and resilience of our ancestors who fought for the ideals of freedom and equality. We honor their legacy by continuing the fight for justice today. This Independence Day, let's raise a fist, remember their names, and claim our rightful place in history. That's a wrap, y'all. Remember, knowledge is power, and we're reclaiming our history, one episode at a time. Stay woke, stay informed, and keep rewriting the narrative. This is the Project Professor, signing off.
It's